Drive. Plus they gave us the name and shop.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to East Bay Charter Township. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Dan, can we get a roll call, please?
Richardson.
Here.
Wassam.
Present.
Walters.
Present.
Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Edley.
Here.
And Leonard.
Here.
And it's noted that Ferguson is absent and excused.
Perfect. Next up is the agenda. Is there any review for conflict of interest? Anyone have anything to declare for tonight's meeting? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda.
So we did receive that letter about the campground from the DNR that Claire said we could add to the agenda.
Could do that. Do you want to cover that under correspondence, or do you want it to be its own thing?
You know, I think that because there's they're looking for a decision to be made, I would recommend adding it as under 9D
Okay.
as an agenda item.
Sounds good.
Can we do that without having it posted and added to the agenda?
So it would be a minor amendment to an approved site plan, which technically can be approved administratively. I'm just not comfortable making that change without getting input from the Planning Commission, since that was one of the conditions of approval. So I'd like to have the Planning Commission weigh in on that.
Okay.
Seems good.
So it's the TC State Park zoning condition. It's the title of the email.
Rhonda, was that a motion?
There is a motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Rhonda, seconded by Paul for approval of the agenda with the addition of item D under MD&R discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next up is public comment. Anyone's welcome to the lectern. Good luck figuring out who's going first. And you're welcome to 3 minutes, and come on up if anybody has anything to contribute.
All right, I'll start us off. Might as well, right, guys? Thank you for being the walking wounded here tonight, Claire. Judy Nemitz, East Bay Township resident. Whoops, my phone got stuck, I'm sorry. One moment, please, thank you. Whoops, thank you very much. Camp Greilich. The preservation and protection of the lakes and the land is a good goal for all of us to support. Nature and outdoor recreation and education are positive opportunities for our community. Consideration for the surrounding community and Brown Bridge Quiet area is essential in this plan. I am concerned about the impact of parts of this plan on Brown Bridge Quiet area in my community. Large events, 50 or more, disc golf tournaments, 66 campsites, plus cabins, large bike races, all have negative effects with limited parking, and the area infrastructure can't handle that kind of capacity. What is going to be the park capacity at one time? 500? With 200 in Besser, 200 in the amphitheater, 100 in the chapel? In addition, the possibility of alcohol, even if handled by an outside vendor or loud music, is not conducive to the goal of preserve and protect nature and our community. I heard rhetoric for the last 8 to 10 months about the nature center and strengthening the conservation easement. There's been no action. There's talk of a possible gun and archery educational range and campground, but we haven't seen a staff model presented to address staffing these issues. Now on to temporary dwellings. Several issues have not been addressed. How about the loopholes in our ordinance? I can have 4 storage vehicles on my property. I can have 4 campers, 4 houseboats, 4 tents. You say we can have 1 on a property. How you gotta change the ordinance then? Because how are you gonna know if someone's living in it or storing it? The township is closed Thursday evening until Monday morning. Who's gonna deal with permits and complaints? Is a privy or a latrine or no potable water acceptable on a tent site or a camper without containment? How do you know if someone's not digging a hole? What is the campsite capacity for people? You haven't addressed that. You can have an RV that's 45 feet long, and Mammoth RV sells a double RV for 122 feet. Or I could just go get a wedding tent or a circus tent, that's one per site. And I can have 150 to 200 people per year. This does nothing to solve the River Road issue and capacities. Do you have to move your camper every 10 days? Or can it sit there and become blight like many are in the lakes area? How about shipping containers? Are you going to approve shipping containers? Please, stop ignoring the 179 people that signed a petition against this, and stop changing zoning for us that built our homes 40 years ago with a wave of the pen. There is too many loopholes, lack of enforcement, so please don't ignore these valid problems. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy.
Good evening. Josh Sloat, Rennie Lake resident. I'm personally thrilled about the opportunity to share the Camp Greilich property with my family and with the community. This is a place where I learned so much about the outdoors as a Boy Scout. It's both exciting and clear that the proposed county park delivers on many of the township's goals and the county's vision for providing increased access to outdoor education and recreational opportunities. Unfortunately, like the GOREC plan that came before it, the county is seeking permission for commercial uses that should never be considered allowable in the Lakes Area District. The plan before you is requesting special exceptions for intense uses that are no more appropriate for the county than they were for GOREC. These uses include large-scale events involving 100-person weddings, 200-person events at Besser, and 200-person events at the amphitheater, while also permitting amplified music and alcohol. This is on top of what will eventually be a 66-site campground and supervised gun range. My previously submitted letter covers these points in far greater detail, but as part of your analysis, I'd ask that you please consider the following. Nonconformities. The record established by the township makes it clear what is and is not grandfathered use for the property. Uses beyond those accessory to a campground are not considered lawful nonconforming. Uses including places of public assembly for events are explicitly not grandfathered. The ordinance. Both the prior and current zoning ordinance make it clear that in the Lakes Area District, events are explicitly not permitted as principal permitted or via special land use. So a PUD was the only vehicle for GOREC to ask for events since they're neither grandfathered nor allowed in the underlying district. This was determined by the township's prior attorney. But a PUD is no longer an option to get exceptions for these uses under the new ordinance since the Lakes Area District is outside of the growth boundary. And of course, there's considerable precedent. Far less intense event centers with no amplified music and within the growth boundary have been denied by this commission, including the Raymond Farm wedding venue due to concerns of the planned scale and intensity for the area. And of course, the Board of Trustees already expressed that alcohol and amplified music are not appropriate for the location in its review of the GOREC PUD. The Rotary withdrew its application 15 days later in response. As explicitly indicated by the authors of the ordinance and adopted by the township, these intense uses are not allowed in the underlying district. They are not grandfathered as legal nonconforming uses. They can no longer be requested via PUD, the one and only tool that previously existed for these exceptions. The Planning Commission previously denied requests for far less intense uses proposed within the growth boundary, and the Board of Trustees made it clear with the GOREC PUD that it would not support any plans involving alcohol or amplified music. Let's all rally behind how great this park can be for outdoor access and education, but we simply cannot allow intense events with alcohol and amplified music. The law is clear, the public record is clear, the precedent is clear, and the choice is clear. Thank you in advance for your thoughtful consideration.
Thanks, Josh. Hey, guys, we could hang on to our applause just so we can kind of keep moving along. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Matt Dukowski, resident of Rennie Lake. Thank you for your time. I'm here today to advocate for the creation of a community-oriented recreation space, one centered around outdoor access education, and low-impact recreation. We've had many conversations as a community about how to do this thoughtfully, and I believe we are in a strong position to move forward, especially when we consider what's missing in Traverse City area. This could and should be a non-alcohol, no loud music zone, intentional, inclusive, and respectful of both our neighbors and the land. Right now, there are very few spaces where people can gather outdoors without the expectation of alcohol, music, or security concerns. Here's the truth. Venues like this barely exist around here. Camp Graylick, while beautiful and well-known, is still uncertain about whether they'll ultimately allow alcohol on the property. The Stone Circle in Keewaydin is one of the few outdoor venues that offer this type of serene, substance-free environment. There's a growing demand for peaceful spaces to connect in nature without the party scene, and our community is in a prime position to meet that demand. And it's not just about filling a gap. It's about aligning ourselves where our culture is headed. Let's talk about a generational shift. You may have heard of the Sober Curious. It's a movement. It's not just a trend. It's a full-on cultural pivot. Gen Z and younger millennials are drinking significantly less than generations before them. Even more interesting, Gen Alpha, the next generation on the rise, is expected to drink even less. There's more health consciousness. They're watching what goes viral on the internet. They're choosing not to be a cautionary tale. And the beverage industry is taking note. The non-alcoholic drink market is booming, driven in large part by this younger, more mindful crowd. This shift presents us with an opportunity. We can create a destination that speaks to a new generation's values. Connection over consumption, nature over nightlife. This shift is echoed in Traverse City's own strategic plan adopted in 2021. The city specifically calls out the need to improve its drinking culture, especially downtown, citing concerns over binge drinking and the negative behaviors tied to alcohol consumption. Currently, alcohol is prohibited in designated areas such as the American Legion Park, the Clinch Park Beach, F&M Park, Hanna Park, Hickory Hills, Hall Park, the J. Smith Walkway, and Lay Park. Additionally, alcohol is now banned on the men's and women's trails near the Grand Traverse Commons. This is all according to the Up North Live.
Yeah, we're just beyond 3 minutes, but I just want to give you a moment to wrap up if you don't mind.
Yep, creating spaces that model a different kind of gathering, one built on nature, education, wellness, directly supports that vision. We also need to be honest about enforcement. The Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Department has already made it clear that they cannot be the ones responsible for responding to misconduct issues stemming from Camp Graylick or any future recreational site. That's why it's critical that we start this space with a clear, enforced policy. Alcohol is not allowed at any events for any reason. This isn't about limiting fun. It's about setting a tone. We can create a safe, family-friendly environment that promotes connection with nature, community education, and quiet recreation. A place that we can use without concern about behavior, noise, or liability. Let's make this something that reflects the heart of Rennie Lake, mindful, respectful, forward-thinking. We have the chance to build something meaningful, not just for us, but for the broader Traverse City community that's already seeking these kinds of spaces. We're not asking for an event complex. We're asking for a space that aligns with the times, a venue that matches the rhythm of our community, and the values of the future. Let's build something that reflects that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Lynch. My husband and I purchased a retirement home on Rennie Lake late in 2023. We purchased there as opposed to other purchasing opportunities that came before us. During that time that we were looking for homes, because it was quiet, peaceful, it was a small, clean lake, and it wasn't imposed upon by a lot of foot traffic. We had a lot of nature around us, could sit out on our back porch and not worry about noise. I thought the whole GoRec thing had been taken care of before we signed the papers. We looked into that deeply, and we were convinced that we weren't going to have to face these kinds of issues. This is important to us because our property is right around the corner from the proposed swim beach, and our property backs up into the property that Gray Lake is occupying. People who walk through those woods back there are walking next to our backyard. I'm here tonight because while this whole process has been relatively transparent, what concerns me is I don't feel listened to. There have been lots of open sessions. I've attended every single one that I could. Voiced my opposition to the things that were being thought about that were difficult for us, not in keeping at all with what we had envisioned for our lake community. And I'm here to say to you again tonight that I am trusting that the trustees here in front of me are going to become very, very familiar with your own ordinances and the rubric that you created some time ago about what is and what is not permitted in public spaces. It's already an ordinance. There is no amplified music. There are no large parties. There is no alcohol. Those things I'm taking for granted are just going to pass you by. What concerns me is that there seems to be this underlying assumption that we must somehow exploit this property as some type of money-making opportunity. And I remind the trustees that it is not incumbent upon public spaces to be revenue-making opportunities. They are simply public spaces to be respected for what they are. That property is a wooded, natural area. It makes sense that what is happening inside of there is very similar to what happens inside of the Brown Bridge Quiet Area. Low impact, people walking through there, hiking. Those are all things that I can be very supportive of. I was very excited we were going to finally have a park in that area, but as it is proposed, it's more like Disneyland. I would ask that you very carefully consider our position as property owners on the lake. If this comes to fruition as it's written, I fear that it will negatively impact upon not only our quality of life, but upon the environment and also reduce our property values. I cannot imagine how I could sell my property or my children could sell our property in light of the fact that there would be loud music in the evenings, alcohol use, and those kinds of things. You're taking away the right to my private use of my property. I appreciate the fact that you listened to me tonight, and I'm trusting you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Karen Smith, Rennie Lake. I just wanted to say that we went to the park meetings, we talked to Mr. Chase, he promised us he was not in the wedding venue, that was not on the agenda, that was not something they were looking to do. If he's not on the wedding venue, why do you need weddings as part of your package that you're presenting tonight? Why do you need events? Has anybody done? a road study other than the 20-year-old one that GOREC put out last year for Hobbs Highway. I don't see how you can have 200 more cars coming to events on Hobbs Highway. It's so crowded now. So those are just some things. I'm really disappointed to have to be back here and start all over again with the things that we went through with GOREC that we did not want. Nobody wants events. Nobody wants weddings. Nobody wants loud music. We live there. Now, if it's hiking, biking, snowshoeing, teaching people how to do things in the woods, nobody cares. That's what it's there for. I mean, we've been there since 1967. So I know what the Boy Scouts did. We know how the Boy Scouts were there. They were not unsupervised. You might have had 100 or 200 Boy Scouts, you might say, but there was supervision. It's not 100 people at a party or 200 people at Besser with no supervision. We just, as residents of the lake, we would appreciate it if you would understand that things that went on at Boy Scouts, maybe it was because of the number of people that were there, is not equal to the number of people at a party or an event at Besser Hall or the amphitheater or any place else. But I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Karen.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Board. Thanks for having us. Since our last meeting, I know we've been talking about
Hey.
camping, individual rights on our property, changing the subject from what we've been on a little bit. But I'm sorry?
Can you identify yourself?
Okay, Jeff Geiger on Cross Country Trail, Traverse City. Thank you. Went around, I made a little questionnaire, just to ask some questions, and I was surprised at the amount of passion and how many comments that people wrote, shared with us here as a group. Everybody that I talked to, except for one gentleman, he just said, yeah, I'm going to have people camp here. I'm just not going to jump on board with the questionnaire. But people want the rights to be able to camp at their property. I have about 100 families here in just a weekend's time. It was very easy to get people on board. It gained a life of its own. People do believe that we're allowed to camp and we should be able to have more flexibility. A lot of people are staying their taxes, their land, they're looking for 365, not that they'd ever use that. Unless you're homeless, you're not going to be living in there year-round, most likely, or if you're building something, it's expensive. I get it, people are doing what they have to do to get by. We don't want to make people unhoused in any way up here. We already have a huge issue with that. People talk about it. They do believe we should be allowed to have one or two, more than one or two tents, campers, RV, for a special occasion. Maybe a limited time frame on that for a weekend or something, or a week event. But for a memorial, a graduation, you're going to get the whole family up. To have one unit on there, just like somebody else mentioned, how you can tell from 4 in storage, or if somebody's actually in there, that's kind of a gray area. But they do want it. They do believe that they should be able to camp on their property. A lot of people, 365, about 90% of that. That blew me away. I thought it was going to be about half and half. We gave an option of what you're recommending, the board, 10 days consecutive or maximum 45 days a year. That didn't go over well at all. There's only a few people that went with that. My in-laws were one of them because they don't want me in their yard longer than that. I get it. And seriously, that was a joke. It wasn't just me, it was the rest of the family, but that's okay. A lot of people did go with the 90 consecutive days, max 180, about almost 10%. 90% of the people put 365 days, and some of the comments I just won't repeat. They weren't real polite. They were really upset that we can't do what we want on our property, and a lot of people use this, sometimes out of necessity. Also, the petition, this is not a petition, this is just people's opinion. I looked at the other property, or the other document that was submitted from the Forest Lakes. I see a lot of names on there, and some of my friends, they didn't sign up for just that no camping thing. A lot of people got on there. That was a broad spectrum of no marinas and all the other issues that was on that one paper. And it had names, but it didn't have any addresses, didn't have anything else to go with it. Maybe there is a petition. I would love to see that if there is, but I never did see a petition that they're talking about. But I'm telling you, the people here, you might need a bigger platform to have the next meeting in. People are passionate about this. I just touched on this because, hey, let me see if I get some people to show up. And like, it was wildfire. I mean, how many people operated and acted on this? And a lot of people do want a few restrictions, but not so much. And they also tell me they haven't had any problems in their own neighborhood. They police each other. There's already ordinances against noise and big bashes and things like that. So I'm going to leave it at that. I know you're busy today, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm happy to sit down. You may need to go to vote on this or something. I mean, because you've got some people pretty passionate about this in the community that we live in, pay taxes in, and enjoy. And we're not trashing it. People that camp are not trashing the land. You know, that's, and you know, if you have a 40-year-old house, you also have a 40-year-old septic on that. We can touch base on a lot of things on water quality. But camping's really not it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Tina Wagner. I live on 4 Mile. I have a beautiful spot to be. I don't feel any one person should tell me what to do with my property. If my property is not trashed, leave me alone. And if my neighbor has a problem, my neighbor's going to come and talk to me. And that's what neighbors need to do. And when people start sticking their nose too far into it, we lose being neighbors. Because everybody's got to fight about this politic. We need to stick together. We need to appreciate our land. We need to be able to have our land. If my kids want to visit, they're welcome to put a tent up or get in my fifth wheel anytime they want. Anytime. And that'll never change. This has got to stop. People pay taxes. People should not be pushed off their properties, like I heard from a lot of these people. We have bought these properties for our lives, our livelihoods. We need to all have compassion and be neighborly instead of the huge thing and fight that goes on.
Thank you, Tina.
Gail Mason, my husband Dave. First of all, we're working with Jeff Geiger back there on the issue that he brought up. I also have a stack of names of people who want to be able to use their property to camp, family and friends, and so forth. We have another issue that's specific to us, and I'm going to address that quickly. You know what it is, but people here don't, maybe. On May 23rd, Traverse City Ticker had an article about the Traverse City State Park closing after Cherry Festival this year through the entirety of next year. No camping at the Traverse City State Park. So I wrote a little letter to Claire, since forwarded it to the rest of the people on this board, and I want to read it for the people in the audience. Good morning, Claire. I assume you read the TC Ticker, but I wanted to emphasize that Traverse City and East Bay Township will see a huge loss of tourism dollars when the state park closes, as outlined in today's ticker. Allowing us to operate a small campground will not make a big difference to the Traverse City area as a whole, but it would make a difference to the East Bay businesses we know our campers frequent. Grello's Market, Cortade's Gas Convenience Store, Pigio's, Olson's, Hopscotch, GJ's, Woodland Suites, Park Shore, Bob Evans, Don's, Culver's. The list goes on. I'm quite sure if you polled these businesses, they would welcome the visitors who would use our small campground. If we need to apply for a special use permit, a campground permit from the state, a health department water test, or whatever may be required, we're happy to do that. See you at the June meeting. If there's anything we can discuss, please let us know. So for those in the audience, my husband and I have 8 acres on a rural road, dirt road, very little traffic. We have had camping there, hip camp camping, which is people park in our field. We own a hay field, 8 acres, people park in the field. They go for the day into Traverse City or Elk Lake or Elk Rapids or wherever they go, spend their money, come back, go to sleep. They spend 2 to 3 days at most. We've had a handful that stayed longer than that. We've had absolutely no complaints from any of our neighbors. In fact, they all think it's awesome what we're doing. We're not asking for a big event venue with hundreds of people for a wedding or a rock concert. We're not asking to put in a firing range. We have no water frontage on our property. It's a hay field. We have no sensitive wetlands area. We're not doing any damage to our property. In fact, we have enhanced it. I welcome anyone on the board to come out and see the wildlife that comes to our yard day in and day out. And this is what the campers come for. Just like the people here for the Grelick issue, they come for the beauty of northern Michigan and nature. They don't want a rowdy place with hundreds of other people. They want a nice, quiet backyard, which is what we give them. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate it.
Hi, Mike Lynch, Rainy Lake. My major concern with Camp Grelick is the rifle range. I was a Boy Scout years ago, and I used rifle ranges on summer camp weeks and things like that, but I'm not sure what this is going to be like. I've heard rumors that it's going to be opened up to law enforcement agencies to use, so I don't know if that means they're going to be shooting AK-47s or M5s or what, but that's not consistent with prior usage with the Scout camp. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm Tom Case. I live on Rainy Lake. I reviewed the plans, the preliminary sketch plans for the county park, and it's very lacking in detail. And I know they've had a lot of discussions asking what people want. A lot of people want swimming, fishing, and kayak rentals. But if you look at the site plan, they only have 300 foot of beach. When Rotary owned the property, they went more towards a conservation easement, and they pulled access foot traffic from around their cove, just to preserve that habitat, which is very fragile. So if you look at the plans, and you haven't seen the details yet, but I suggest when you see those details, you ask them how they're going to do all of that activity in only 300 feet of frontage, because the cove that Bessemer looks over is very shallow. It's not suitable for fishing. And it's just that little spat of land. I've heard they're going to take down the lifeguard tower. That wasn't mentioned in the details. But there just isn't a lot of beach there to do all the things they would want. And if they're going to be ADA compliant, how are they going to get people from the parking lot down to that area? Right now, it's a Sandy 2 track. And I have not seen anything where they said they're going to pave it, but I would assume if you're going to have kayaks and things down there, their plan did say they would put roads in for vendor drop-off and pickup. It just seems like there's a lot of detail that's been missing. That would be a very key part of this plan, and it's just not there. So when they present the details, I think you'd like to look at those and make sure it's actually doable. We would not want them to go forward and all of a sudden say, oh, everybody wants this, so we're going to have to share up the landscape between the parking lot to get down to the beach. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Going once, going twice. Okay. Thanks for all that, everyone. And we're going to bring it back to the commission. And Claire, I know we've kind of talked about, is this just a presentation? This is just a presentation of the actual Grelick, so we don't have any new correspondence to go through, I presume. And that being said, we can move into reports with the Township Board. Mindy.
So the last meeting, we were introduced to the new Public Works Director. His name is Noah Carlberg. As everybody knows, John Donoso unexpectedly passed away last year, and so they have filled that position. We also talked about the Lamar lawsuit, and I'm not sure how much I can say, so I will just leave it at that. We talked about housekeeping on the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. We just had some resolutions. We had to clean up the paperwork. We adopted the beach plan. We also adopted the zoning amendments that we have talked about here, the wireless communication, the non-motorized access, and the vehicular stream crossing. And we also approved the hiring of 2 part-time election assistants.
Nice. Any questions for Mindy? Okay, Paul with ZBA.
Okay, we had our meeting on May 13th, and we had actually 3 variances. They're all kind of interesting. The first variance, the first applicant actually had 2 variances, one requesting a variance from the distance of the road, so he could be putting up a garage. The property that he has a very small level area, and then it just goes straight on down. And we approved that variance for the variance as far as the distance that he needed to be from the road. The second part of his variance was to construct the garage, but that went across or into the impervious area. We had a discussion on that. We tabled or postponed that part of it to give him an opportunity to redesign his garage area and to return to the wild, you might say, part of his property to fit within the impervious requirements. So on him, he got a split decision of an approval for the distance from the road to his garage, and then a postponement on the second part to redesign, and then come back to the planning division staff to see if he can get approval on that, which would actually not need another variance. The second one was interesting because this gentleman wanted to create a larger garage slash storage area of his house. He's currently at 40% impervious. By actually approving the variance to allow him to develop that property, we actually took it from 40% variance down to 30% variance, which is kind of going the other way. So basically what we did is that we approved that and actually improved the impervious area. So.
Nice. Any questions for Paul? Okay, next up is Claire, Planning and Zoning.
Okay, well, thanks to everyone who attended the Agriculture and Open Space Forum last week. We had good attendance, good discussion. We will be coming back to the Planning Commission likely with some, probably some small tweaks to the cluster tool that we have in the open space preservation. So probably not any large changes to the zoning ordinance, but we received some feedback through the public, and it was a productive conversation. Second update I wanted to give is we are looking at late July, exact date to be determined. We're planning to host a public open house around the Corridor Improvement Authority. So as you know, the township has been looking at creating a Corridor Improvement Authority to help with implementation of the East Bay Beach District vision. And so we're looking at doing some outreach and education. We're looking at having an open house here at the Township Hall and also at a location along the corridor. So more information to come related to that.
Any questions for Claire? Okay. After reports, we'll get into approval of the meeting minutes from May 6th, 2025. Any corrections or alterations we need to discuss?
Yeah, I have one clarification I think we need to do. On the minutes discussing item 6, before the Planning Commission on the discussion of the park, there is a sentence in here where they talked about the entrance off of 31 and the new accessible campground contact station, a new park headquarters, and removal of the non-accessible pedestrian bridge over 31. I'd like to correct that. That is non-ADA compliant accessible. Right now, it gives you the impression that the bridge can't be used at all, but in fact, it's only limited by the ADA.
Right.
So if we could add in that one phrase to clarify that.
That makes sense. Was that a motion also?
That's a motion to approve the minutes with the adjustment.
Thank you. All right, we got a motion by Paul, second by Steve for approval of the meeting minutes from May 6, 2025 with that addendum. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next up is under item 9 is our first site plan review, which is 9-25 and special land use 1-25 Appier. We'll host a public hearing here shortly, but Claire, I'll kick it to you to just kind of set the table for us, please.
Okay, and I appreciate the patience with this applicant. So this is a special land use permit. The reason being that a special land use permit is needed is because the total accessory buildings all combined together exceed 6,000 square feet, and so that's a threshold in our zoning ordinance that requires a special land use permit. So anything on a parcel of 5 acres or more, if it exceeds 6,000 square feet, they do require a special land use permit. This particular parcel, it's 2 40-acre parcels, so it's 80 acres total. There's an existing large home as well as 2 large accessory buildings that are already in existence on the parcel. The applicant right now has a number of some kind of mechanical equipment that they're looking to store. So really what they're looking to do is just add 2 smaller accessory buildings, one at 700 square feet and the other one at 840 square feet. So you'll see on the site plan, they're well screened from any adjacent neighbors. They're significant distance from any type of wetlands, natural areas. There's no tree removal. So, I really had no concerns over this proposal, and the only reason it's a special land use permit is just due to the size of the existing buildings. So, and I believe Joe Millward, their consultant is here as well.
Gotcha. Anything you'd like to add as the applicant?
No, I think Claire covered it all.
I come to the,
Come on up anyway. And who are you and who are you representing?
I am Joe Millward with Millward Custom Homes, representing the Appier
Thank you.
family. Just one point of clarification. You said mechanical equipment, just implements and things like that for tractors and skid steers. But other than that, I think Claire covered everything. It's just there was a previous special land use permit that was issued for one larger building. They didn't end up building that, so we're just reapplying for 2 smaller buildings. So.
Gotcha. Any questions for the applicant or Claire from the board? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely.
Good to meet you. An 80-acre parcel away from everybody feels about right.
I've got no issues with this. This is, they've done a very nice job with their property.
Again, was that a motion, Paul?
We have a public hearing.
All right.
Public hearing, hold on.
Jumping the gun.
We need the public hearing, right?
That being said, we'll open the public hearing this evening at 7:11 on this. Anybody has any comments, feel free to come on up to the lectern that talk about this specific case. Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 7:12, bring it back for consideration of a motion.
I move to approve site plan review 925, the special land use 1-25 for the Appiers with the recommendations 1 through 3 as established by the planning staff.
Support.
Thank you. We have a motion by Paul, seconded by Mindy for approval of site plan review 9-25 and special land use 1-25 Appiers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Joe, for coming on in. We appreciate working with you. Next up is a sketch plan review for Grand Traverse County Camp Graylick. This is an introduction and discussion, and maybe Claire, if you'd set the table for us, that'd be great.
Sure. Yep, so we've got Grand Traverse County here. The purpose of a sketch plan review is before there's any type of a formal application, site plan submittal before the Planning Commission. It provides an opportunity for the applicant to share their plans with the Planning Commission as well as from the public, receive some feedback before undertaking costly engineering studies, those types of things. So this is something that the township offers to the applicant. It's a free, no fee associated. So Grand Traverse County is here tonight. As you are aware, they're planning to repurpose the former Boy Scout camp as a public park. As will be presented tonight, they're seeking approval from the Planning Commission for kind of, I believe, Phase 1, 2, and a portion of Phase 3. So as you'll see with the business plan that was approved by Grand Traverse County Parks Commission, as well as by the Board of County Commissioners, that Parks Master Plan is phased, and they're looking to kind of to phase in, to bring it in phases. So, public park, the site is zoned Lakes area. The public park is a use that's permitted by right. The Planning Commission will receive a detailed presentation this evening on plans for management, improvements, and phasing of implementation. The two items that I would recommend that the Planning Commission pay special attention to, one is just the phasing and just kind of what that's going to look like, the timing, ask questions related to that, as well as kind of figuring out at what point may additional reviews be required, if at all, for the applicant to come back. And then the second one, as has been mentioned through the public comment period, is the special event. So the applicant does anticipate having special events and programming a part of that day-to-day operations. And so I think an important consideration will be what that threshold looks like. So what are kind of the day-to-day operations of the park versus what would be the type of event where the county would come in for a transient activity permit or a special event permit. So I think those are two important items to kind of keep in mind as we move through the review tonight.
Got it. Thank you. And the applicant's here this evening.
Yes. Thank you. My name is John Chase. I'm the Parks and Facilities Director for Grand Traverse County. Thank you, Commission. Thank you, Claire. And thank you to the guests for joining us tonight. So what we're going to talk about today is, as you mentioned, Camp Greilich. And we're going to focus on the areas that you see on the right-hand side here. So our guiding principles, what helped us create this document, the proposed uses that have been, we've talked about a little bit already, and then some additional things that you see on the boards here. Our current partners, park rules and management practices that we'll use to be able to help guide those things, and then a little bit about transparency at the end about how we can make sure that we're continuing to keep you and everybody else updated and how we have been doing so all along. So first thing I want to just point out, actually I want to get my clicker to the right spot here. I guess that's not working, so there we go. So our core vision when we wrote our park master plan is as you see here. So protect and preserve the conservation value of the property and dedicate it as a public space where county residents and visitors can experience passive and active outdoor recreation, learn to be better stewards of the environment, and develop skills to improve their outdoor experience. And that core vision has many facets to it, and we'll talk about those facets and how they fit together as we go through here. Now, how did we develop that particular core vision? So we developed that core vision looking through our guiding documents. So the first of those guiding documents is our park master plan, our property master plan. That master plan was approved by our Grand Traverse County Parks Commission in April, and it was also accepted by our County Board of Commissioners. And that plan grew out of numerous conversations, public meetings, as well as additional conversations with members of the public. And for example, the items that you see over here, these two boards that I brought in, these are some from one of the public input sessions, where we'd ask people, how would you imagine yourself using the park? And adding a dot to your favorite program items. So we had different program items in different areas that we were looking at and trying to get an idea of how people would be using the property or interested in using the property. The second of those documents is the conservation easement. So as has been mentioned already, the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy worked with the Boy Scouts and Rotary, the former owner of the property, to place a conservation easement on the property in 2002. That conservation easement exists. We are still looking into tightening that easement a little bit further, but ultimately we need to make sure that we are bound by that and we're supporting that conservation easement. So we've had numerous opportunities to work very closely with Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. We'll talk about some of the meetings that we've had and some of the walkthroughs of the property that we've had to make sure that we are honoring that agreement. And then the third is our 5-year recreation plan. So as a municipality with a park system, we have a 5-year recreation plan, just as East Bay Township has a 5-year recreation plan. And that plan, when we actually created it in 2023, one of the things that we went through the process in creating that was a public input process, and people told us that they would like to see more of a county park presence in the south end of the county. Well, lo and behold, as we're finishing that process up, this particular piece of property became available, and we think it's a great addition to the overall spectrum. And that would be basically taking our park system from 8 to 9 parks with about 1,600 acres combined across all those park entities. So in taking a look at all of those documents, we use that to help guide us, and we'll continue to use that to help guide us as we move along. So some of the keys to success: one, being a good steward of the land, of the property's history, and of the taxpayer dollar. We have a responsibility to do each of those 3 things. We also have a responsibility for community interaction. Days like today, hearing from folks that are here today, continuing to field emails and voicemails and phone calls and having those conversations with folks, and continuing to make sure that we're having that community interaction, not just at the start, but continuing to have that community interaction all along. And then, as I mentioned, managing to those documents, and ultimately, partnership. We're a small Parks Department. In fact, the majority of our Parks Department is here in this room. So I've got a couple folks that I'd like to thank: Kira Yulee and Travis Peck. They've done a fantastic amount of work, as has the rest of our team as well, on not only this plan, but also understanding how we make sure that this park becomes the best it can be for everybody who's going to be involved in that process. But the reason that I go there is that we don't have the resources to be able to do the programming and the activity that we'd like to be able to do that would honor this particular park. If you think about when the Scouts were there and all the programming that they did from an outdoor education standpoint, we've got a great amount of resources in the community that can do that, and the partnerships will help us with that. So in case we're just a level set, so we're all understanding which piece of property that we're talking about. So on the map that you see ahead of you, the piece right in the red in the middle there is the northern 196 acres of the former Camp Greilich property. Camp Greilich property was a total of 500 acres. The southern 300 acres that you see directly below that in the red with the hash marks, that is a section that is under contract with the city to make a purchase to add to the Brown Bridge Quiet Area. And then the parcel immediately to the west with the lake in the middle of it is referred to as the Spring Lake parcel. That 228 acres is also under contract with the city to add to the Brown Bridge. So the combination of all of these will bring over 2,000 contiguous acres of recreational space to the area. So in terms of proposed park uses, we're going to break this down into a couple of different segments. So first is all phases, and then the second is the current review. As has been mentioned already, the sketch plan review, the idea behind the sketch plan review is that we come to you with the outline, and we're asking, tell us if we're moving in the right direction, if you think these are the things that we should be moving toward, and then we would come back for our site plan review with that additional level of detail. Well, that's the same thing with our all phases versus current review, is that we're not trying to eat the elephant all in one bite. There's a lot of things that we see as opportunities for the property, and we'll list those all up here. So these are the 5 phases that we are looking to implement over time. But again, we're not trying to eat the elephant all in one bite. We've taken that and distilled that down to what do we believe that we can reasonably implement in the next year to 2 years and make a reasonable space. So we're looking at phases 1, 2, and a portion of phase 3. Now, we'll break down those uses and talk about those in a little bit more detail here, but just wanted to kind of give you that illustration that we're not talking about everything. We're talking about a subset of things. And we've chosen those in a number of different ways. So one way that we've chosen these particular items is we've chosen them based on those dots that we see over here and asking people, how will you use the property? That's a big one. Staff and volunteer capacity, as I mentioned, is another one. As I mentioned, 2/3 of the staff is here in the room right now. So we've got that limited capacity. Although we do have a great volunteer capacity. We've really seen that grow. Since we've been putting out the calls for volunteers, we've got a few different groups that have, one came out actually yesterday and helped refurbish the foosball court. And then we've got another group that's coming out. It's the former Greilich alumni, and that has grown beyond the alumni to a number of people who are interested in coming out and helping out and doing some cleanups on the property. But that volunteer capacity, as that grows, that gives us the opportunity to open the park and get it in the public hands even sooner. The next is availability of professionals and subcontractors to manage technically challenging or sensitive items. So an example of that is the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. I mentioned that they've been a great benefit in helping to secure the property, but then also giving us advice as we've been walking through the property and understanding the property. They've got some phenomenal resources that have helped us understand the trail system, where we should route trails, where we should abandon trails because they're going through sensitive areas or not very sustainable, and how to make sure that we're building those in the proper way that make them sustainable and supporting the environment. The other is that we look at complexity and lower impact uses. So when I say complexity, I'll use camping as an example. So if I go back here just a moment, so you see camping is number 5. And a lot of people look at that and think, well, camping, that should be a pretty easy one to implement. But surprisingly, camping is actually the hardest of all of them to implement, which is why we put that at the bottom of the list. There's more infrastructure, there's more permitting, there's more considerations for basically having people dispersed in 11 different camp areas on the site that we would need to consider and make sure we manage all those things before we even consider going down that road. So that's way down the list. We're not even looking at that one, but I wanted to give you that idea of, we chose this based on what is the easiest to implement on down to the hardest to implement. And so, not to overuse that phrase, but what is the low-hanging fruit, and then go from there. The other is the intent to move slowly and thoughtfully through the process. So we can do this really fast, or we can do this right. And our objective is, let's make sure that we do this right. And then the last is project funding. The old phrase is that anything can be done with time and money. We've got a limited time, or we got limited time, we've got a limited amount of money. So we want to make sure that we are doing this in such a way that gives us the opportunity to bring those things to the public that are easier to implement, that are lower cost to implement, and lower impact to implement. So if we break this into 2 separate areas, recreation is the first one, and we'll talk about each of these items. So from a recreation standpoint, recreation is defined as anything that you do when you're not, effectively when you're not working. I think there was a specific phrase that you gave me earlier. You kind of pulled it up in Webster's dictionary. What you do for enjoyment when you're not working is the simple definition. So when we look at recreation, there's many different facets of recreation. So trail access is the first one, and you saw that as the first item on phase 1 of our plan. We have had a number of folks from Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy, Conservation District, Brown Bridge Quiet Area Advisory Committee, TART, Northern Michigan Mountain Bike Association. I know I'm missing somebody, but there's a couple of other organizations. Aloft Disc Golf has been helping us out with that as well. All these organizations coming together and giving input on the trails. And these are all different representatives from different user groups. North Country Trail Association, I may have missed that one. But representatives from all these different trail user groups. And we basically brought them all together on property and said, y'all need to play nice in the sandbox. So how do we make sure that whatever trail network that we develop on the property meets everybody's needs, that it doesn't create intersections that are unsafe or create a bad environment for everybody. So trail access is the one that we've been working on consistently. And we're pretty close to putting squiggly lines on a piece of paper and being able to have a good trail network set up. So we're just about there. The second is disc golf course. There's already an 18-hole disc golf course on property. That disc golf course was in use by the prior group. I won't say the G word here, but it was in use by that group. It was also in use by the Scouts as well. And so we've been working with Aloft Disc Golf as part of that trail network to make sure that that disc golf course, that we can revive that disc course and bring it back to even better condition than it was before, but then also to make sure that that disc golf course doesn't interfere with anything else that's on the property. The next one down there, pavilion, amphitheater, lodge, cabin, chapel rental. So let's talk a little bit about those items. So we have an opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that people have an opportunity to enjoy spaces in ways that meet them where they are. And people have used this property for many years to create special memories and special places that have connected them to that special place. And we all have special places that we've created memories. And we want to make sure that people have the opportunity to create those special memories in those places as well. So we've got infrastructure there that can be used if somebody wants to host their family reunion at this location. That gives them an opportunity to do that. If they want to host their 5-year-old's birthday party at the location, that gives an opportunity to do that. If they want to have a play at the amphitheater, that gives people the opportunity to do that. And those are all aspects of recreation. The lodge. We've been talking with a trade association that is interested in coming in and doing a daytime forum where they would use that space, educate their members, and then have that in a beautiful environment. And either before or after, they can go on a hike or a bike ride or whatnot through the trails and be able to experience the property, but then also be able to use that property for that kind of opportunity. The cabins and the chapel rental as well. So there are 6 full-service cabins. We'll see those in here in just a moment. And there's also a number of smaller cabins. We've got some ideas on those. I'll share those in just a minute here. And as well the chapel rental. So imagine that you were a scout on property and you loved the place. You made great memories in the place. Who are we to say if there's a chapel there that you couldn't get married in the chapel? That's not to say that we'd have a giant party there, but to be able to use that chapel to create that memory that you'll have for a lifetime and be able to share that with your family members who might not have had the experience before. Or what if a church service? What if a church wants to be able to use that space for an outdoor service? So those are opportunities that we see as becoming available for it. The swimming, beach, and fishing area. Those are already on property. They're already set up in that space. And then we've also recognized that there's a number of pocket amenities. There's things that are already on property that in some cases we didn't even know about. So as we were scouting through the property and doing some of our trail walks, we kind of stumbled across, there's a mini BMX track that's on property. Didn't even know that. But it's kind of covered by moss and just covered by leaves and such. And that could be a great opportunity to be able to broom all that stuff off and be able to have families come there and enjoy that small BMX track. There's a foosball court. I mentioned that earlier. We had a group from, I think they called themselves the Sisterhood group? Yeah. So Travis organized that, and a group from Spider Lake came over, and they spent the entire day having a fantastic time rebuilding that foosball court, rebuilding the lines that go in the court, staining the entire court, cleaning it all out, and just really making that a nice space. There's a bouldering wall, and then we've had opportunities to think about, could we put a nature playscape? Could we put a story walk in there? So again, families can go in. If you've ever seen a story walk, it's basically story panels, and you read those different panels, like pages of a book, and you walk through the forest and experience that book, but you also experience it in a walk through the forest. So there's different opportunities in terms of those pocket amenities that are either on-site or that we feel that we could add to the property. Educational programming. Let's talk a little bit about that as well. So the picture that you see here is really just for reference, because this is not in our phase 1, 2, or 3. So this is a phase 4, but it's more of a historical reference of the fact that the property was used for education. So something near and dear to my heart is outdoor education. I do that on a regular basis. I'm a kayak instructor, I'm a stand-up paddleboard instructor, a river instructor, a wilderness first aid instructor, a CPR instructor. All those kinds of things are near and dear to my heart personally. And I've also been involved in a number of other activities that I know a lot of other folks have told us that they would be interested in. If you go through those items on the board, you'll see that people said they'd like to learn how to orienteer. The lost art of finding your way with a map and compass is truly that lost art. Many of us can't navigate within a couple of miles of our house unless we have Google. So being able to do that with a map and compass is a fantastic thing. And that's something that was done for 61 years, I think it was, that the Scouts, maybe 71 years that the Scouts were on property. So that educational programming can expand beyond just those hard skills, but environmental education, wildlife education. We've had conversations for a future phase with some wildlife educators that could be a fantastic addition to the property, but we need to build toward that. Day camp programming. I think we can all agree that there's a shortage of day camp programming throughout the county. We hear the YMCA, for example, sells out their day camp programming. They sold their day camp programming out in 3 minutes this year for the entire summer. So, and historically, they've had people lining up, camping out at the West YMCA overnight to try and get a spot. They moved it all online this year. It eliminated the camping on property, but it also meant that they sold it out in 3 minutes. So many of those day camp providers that are out there have said, we have an interest in hosting day camps, but we don't have the space and we can't get the staff. So we've got an opportunity to be able to provide something that for both of those areas, and more on that here in just a second for when our infrastructure updates. The other possibility is organized on-site recreation. So supervised youth gatherings. I go back to orienteering, right? So bring a group of kids together and teach them that particular skill, or bring them together to get them an off-screen day And it's an opportunity to just bring them out, nothing on screens. How do we expose them to nature in many different ways? Disc golf tournaments is another example. So there is a course on property that we've already mentioned. Aloft Disc Golf has said they would be interested in hosting something like that. 1 to 2 disc golf tournaments a year, those max out at 72 people. You can't have more than that in those tournaments, just like a golf tournament if you're a golfer. So 18 holes, 4 people, 72 would be the max for something like that. And then scout programs. So again, 61 years or 71 years, math is hard. From 1955 to 2016, the scouts were there. And we'd love to be able to make an opportunity for the scouts to be able to come back and to hold their, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've been a scout, so scouts help me out. Camporee, thank you. So Camporee, have the winter thing. What's the winter thing called? Klondike Derby, right. So all those kinds of things, being able to bring those back and have a space to be able to do all that. And think if you were a child at camp many years ago, and now you've got the opportunity to bring your own child to the same camp that you really enjoyed. So it could be some pretty cool opportunities, and we see that that is really a cornerstone of the whole thing is the programming, is the educational, the outdoor education, as I'd mentioned before. Now, in order to make all that happen, we do have some infrastructure upgrades that we would need to make. So I mentioned the full-service cabins, and we've actually put some infrastructure upgrades into those full-service cabins already in terms of changing out the ranges and changing out some of the water heaters, then just opening them up, cleaning them up, getting some of that stuff ready. But I put a couple of items on here that I thought were important. So I mentioned day camp earlier. And so many of those day camp providers that we've talked to have said, again, I'm interested, I don't have space, and I can't get staff here because there's no place to house them. So if we could use those cabins as an opportunity to house some day camp staff, then we've got an opportunity to be able to bring that day camp to the property, and then be able to bring that day camp to the south end of the county, into the lakes area. The other is work group housing. So I mentioned some of our volunteer groups. So we've got volunteer groups that may come in town, and if they were looking for housing, we can basically trade that housing for support of the property. So there's opportunities like that, more so than renting them. We're looking at how can we use those as an adjunct to be able to support programming. When somebody can't, they could be a day camp base of operations as well. So for day camp, you need a space to be able to house everything for the camp. Use that cabin, house everything for the camp. You can use the cabin if it's a small enough camp for emergency shelter in the case of weather. You can use Besser as an emergency shelter in the case of weather as well. There are also 7 semi-rustic cabins. So these little tiny cabins that you see in the picture here, they're about the size of a toll booth. So they're pretty small. But for somebody who basically wants to have a camping experience but doesn't want to camp on the ground, this can be an opportunity for them. And they're served by a shower house that's just out of frame here to the left. So those are kind of infrastructure upgrades that we would need to make sure we shore those up and we set that shower house up in order to be able to use that. Besser lot, oh yes.
How many are there of those?
There are 7 of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're each outfitted for 2 people, so there's basically 2 beds, a rug, and a ceiling fan. That's it. So Besser Lodge. So as mentioned, Besser Lodge earlier, great amenity. Overlooks Rennie Lake, used for years as the dining hall. That can be an opportunity. We've had, again, if you look through the dots on the board there, we've had homeowners groups that have said, hey, this could be a great place for us to be able to come and use have our homeowners meetings. Educational programs, that you can bring people in, do environmental education and wildlife education and all the other sorts of outdoor education and recreation in that space as well. The amphitheater, which we talked about as well. The amphitheater, some of the boards in the amphitheater, they've warped. We've had some downfall in there. We've had the fence fall down, those kinds of things, just because the property's not been used in years. So we have to bring those areas back to their glory as well. And the same with the chapel. The chapel itself, there's great benches in front of that chapel. But those benches, they're covered with moss. We need to clean all that off and make sure that those become available for people to use as well. And then put a coat of paint on the building and sharpen the building up and make sure that that's ready to go. So relatively simple infrastructure upgrades, but things that do take time in order for us to make that happen. Going back to Besser for just a second, one of the other things we take a look at is we take a look at the full system, so the mechanical, electrical, the plumbing systems, which we've done, and we recognize some of the deficiencies, particularly in that building. And we also have some deficiencies in the full-service cabins that we've shored some of those up in terms of securing the gas lines. We had a couple of small gas leaks when we turned it on, so we shut that off, made sure we protected those gas leaks. And then the septic system. So we actually had all the septic systems tested, had all the septic systems pumped as well, and we know we've got some root intrusion on a few of those, so we'll be doing that kind of work to make sure that those are back in shape. So, some additional use details that I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to mention here. So tree removals, very limited tree removal, basically limited to life safety. We had an opportunity to come out and walk the property with Brian Belcher from GT Metro, and he gave us advice on what he felt should be changed just from a life safety standpoint. Outside of that, the only thing we would really remove is hazard and severely diseased trees, and that would be something that we would check with the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy to make sure that that fits in with the conservation easement as well. And we've already talked to them, and if we're changing trail routing based on their recommendations and such, we do have the opportunity, if we need to remove some small saplings less than 1 inch at diameter of breast height, or diameter at breast height. We can do that and still be within the conservation easement. Now, don't get that wrong. That does not mean that we're trying to remove every tree that's 1 inch or less at diameter of breast height. Just if we're routing through a trail through that area, that might give us the opportunity to do that if there's no other choice to be able to route that trail in a sensible and sustainable manner. Another of the pieces that has been mentioned a little bit already, and again, this is our sketch plan review, so we don't have all the detail yet, but what we are planning to do is we are planning to limit operating hours and time parameters for rentals based on the size of the program, restroom requirements by attendance numbers, and ultimately, our rental of those facilities is not based on trying to generate revenue, it's generating a cost recovery. So when we look at cost recovery for a park, we look at that as kind of a pyramid. So imagine that pyramid, and that base of the pyramid is the stuff that's for everybody. So everybody can come into the park and use the trails. We're not going to charge somebody to come in and use the trails or enjoy any of those types of amenities. But it costs money to maintain those trails. It costs money to put material down on those trails. It costs money to make sure we're managing erosion on those trails. It costs money to put signage up on those trails. So all of those things, funding needs to happen for those. Now, yes, we are fortunate to have general funding, but if we can offset some of that rental and some of that impact that people are having, not with the if we can offset some of that impact that people are creating with the trails by renting some of the other facilities, not only do we cover the cost of the maintenance on those facilities, but then we also can take the overage from some of those rentals and be able to apply that to the things at the bottom of the pyramid. So that's the reason for that. And as you go up in that pyramid, the top of that pyramid are the things that really relate only to a very small number of people. So again, that base is for everybody. That top of the pyramid is for a small number of people. So I'll use cabin rental as an example. If somebody's renting the cabin or even the pavilion or Besser or any of those items, that's really just serving their particular group. So we're not only going to recover the cost for that particular item, but in many cases, we're going to have a premium on top of that that helps us offset the cost at the bottom of the pyramid. So it's not about just generating revenue, it's about making sure that we can sustain that particular park and we can sustain the maintenance. We do not have any plans to do anything, any activity on the property that would require any special use permits. We intend to have everything that's self-contained on the property. And then another one of the safety pieces that we wanted to point out is that we don't think that cars and people on trails mix. So if you've been to the property before, as you drive in, there's a large parking lot. When you get to that large parking lot, there's a gate that blocks from that parking lot from the rest of the property. So the pavilion is beyond that gate, Besser Lodge is beyond that gate. Our intention is to keep that gate closed. So cars will come to the parking lot, cars won't go elsewhere. The only exception to that is if somebody needs to get to one of those spaces and they need accessible parking or accessible arrangements, then we can arrange to open that gate, bring them in. The other is for any vendor pickup or vendor drop-off or vendor pickup. All right, so if there's anything like that, so we would have that as an availability, but then in, out, done with that. A couple of other items, safety additions to secure the shotgun range. There's also a rifle range and other areas that's needed. As we've mentioned before, that's not something, the use of any of those ranges is not something that is in our phase that we're coming to today. That's later on down the road that we would consider something like that. But that said, we still do have an obligation to make sure that we're securing those ranges. So there's small fencing around that now. We would like to beef that fencing up. We'd like to put a bit additional signage up around that. And then as we're putting, so just to notify folks that that is a range. Don't go in there. Just stay out. Don't eat the bullets. I don't. So we'll put those additional signage up and additional fencing. We are not planning any additional lighting changes, so there is some downlighting that runs from the parking lot to the Besser Lodge, and that's already in place. We don't have any intention to put any more lighting on property. And then the last one is just emergency access, making sure that we sign and maintain those emergency access points. So that's another conversation that we had with Brian Belcher to make sure that they have the opportunity to be able to get an ambulance in there or any other apparatus to make sure that people remain safe. So we would, of course, do that as well. So speaking of some of the features, I realize now just how small that is. So I'll point to just a couple things here for you. So those full-service cabins are right up at the top here. Give you a scale of reference. So this along here is Hobbs Highway. And then just out of frame right at the top here is Scout Camp Road. So Scout Camp Road will run up here. And then this road right here is the entrance drive, and that comes in to the parking lot. There are 103 parking stalls in that parking lot. Those are the stalls that we're going to use. We don't have any other parking stalls. We're not planning on using any other parking stalls. We're not planning on building another parking lot or anything of that type. It's those 103 stalls that we would use. The gate that I was referring to is right about there. And then you walk down that road, and that will take you down to the pavilion, to the Besser Lodge, and then to some of the other amenities over on this side, including those small cabins. The story walk in the gardens would be planned for this area. Swimming beach is accessed through another road just past Besser. And then the human foosball court and that little BMX track and our potential mud kitchen are down that road. And then we would build that network of trails. And some of those trails are in existence already. So this is not intended for you to be able to see everything on here and read everything that's on here, but it's intended to just give you an idea of this is our working model so far of the trails. So we've basically used a map that was created by Troop 88 out of Kingsley. So thank you to that troop. If anybody's here, thank you. We appreciate you. But they created this, and they put some of the trails on here. We're continuing to add more trails, and we're using this as our working map to decide what is and what is not intersecting. Are we creating the network that we need to? So continues to be a working model here. All right. I mentioned our partners earlier, so just wanted to make sure that I made reference to those partners, and those two at the bottom there that I've referred to already. So the Camp Greilich Alumni Group, which again has opened up to much more than the Camp Greilich alumni, and then local residents group like the Sisterhood group that have come out and helped us. But these partners have been invaluable in giving us advice and helping us understand what kind of amenities we can bring to the property. So, in terms of managing activity, so there's a couple of different ways that we would focus on managing activity on the property. So we got park rules. Our park rules are already in place. We'll talk about those in just a moment. And then the second is proposed management practices. So things that don't necessarily fit the park rules, but that we would use to govern specific uses on the property. So in terms of our park rules, we've committed to this at the beginning. We've committed to it as well by making sure that we revised our park rules, which were adopted about two weeks ago by our Board of Commissioners. So that those park rules state no outside watercraft permitted to launch from county property into Spider, Bass, or Rennie Lakes. That is a commitment that we make. That is a commitment we will continue to uphold. Our current park rules also mirror East Bay Township's zoning ordinance. They are consistent with those two. Now, I mentioned we'll also be looking at additional management practices that would allow us to limit those hours of activity that might occur there. Many activities that are in our park rules are allowed by permit only. So the two examples that you see here below are camping and hunting. So I'll mention what I mean by that right now. So our current park rules say that you cannot camp on park property without permission from the director. Well, we operate a campground on Power Island already. And so when somebody applies for a permit for camping at Power Island and they receive that permit is their approval. If they don't have that permit, they don't have the authorization to camp on that property. So our park rules already give us the opportunity to govern the things that we don't want to have happen and also allow the things that we do want to have happen. We closely went through those rules. We had members of the public who were at our Rules Committee meeting and are here today as well, who joined us at those meetings and gave us input on those rules. So hunting is another one. Again, that's not part of our plan right now, but just to give you that reference, our park rules specifically say no hunting without permission of the director. So when we offer that permit or offer that ability, then somebody has the ability to hunt on that property. The second, as I mentioned, was proposed management practices. And this is a part where we're looking for your help with, right? So one, fee structure tied to activity impact. Remember that pyramid that I mentioned? Right? The things that are at the bottom are for everybody. As we go up in that pyramid, that's something for a lesser number of people, for a smaller group of folks. So our focus would be on incentivizing the highest mission fit. If you go back to that core vision that we had, I mentioned there were many facets in that core vision. Well, essentially, the more facets that your activity fits in that core vision, the greater incentive we would like to provide for you to be able to use the property. So our plan would be to more highly incent not-for-profit groups, for example, to be able to use the property and to be able to run their programs and such on property. Programming groups that would benefit a large number of people. That is another one that we would say that's one that we would incentivize. We'd put plans in place to be able to do that. Alcohol has been mentioned. Yes, our current park rules do allow alcohol in our park properties. And that's something that we've done, 2021 is, I believe, when that was started in the parks. We've not had an issue with that, and I am going to just secure ourselves, right? But that is something that we believe that is an opportunity to be able to be allowed. Now, in my 17 years of managing parks, I've not experienced times when people are coming to a park to get drunk. Time of use. So I mentioned proposed management practices in terms of time of use. So I mentioned earlier that maybe we would rent Besser Lodge, for example. So if somebody's renting Besser Lodge, we would impose rules that may be different from our park hours that you see listed there. So our park hours are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Well, we would impose park rules that basically would say your rental would end at, say, 8 p.m. I'll just throw that number out as an example, right? So we can put those different management practices in place and hold people to those specific management practices. Also put management practices in place that would limit event size and would either benefit or disadvantage different types of user groups. Park rules I just mentioned, or park hours I'd mentioned. So our park hours say one thing, but we can put a management practice in place that governs the use of that specific amenity that changes the park rules. Same thing with overnight stays. We can limit overnight stays. We can determine how we're going to manage that in terms of fitting within our expectations for people. So when we have Power Island, for example, when we have somebody renting at Power Island, we have a specific set of rules that those people are bound to as they're managing that overnight stay. What can you do, what can you not do in terms of fires, in terms of use, in terms of quiet hours, all those things we'd put in place for that. And then ultimately we take a risk management approach. We do this today with any rental that we have now. After those rentals, we look at that process and we say, is there something that we needed to do different? Are we managing the risk? Are we assuming the right amount of risk associated with that particular rental? Or is there something that we need to do to specifically secure that or otherwise benefit? And then the last piece that I just wanted to point out is, as I mentioned, transparency. So we've taken the opportunity to have public input meetings to continue to gather input from the public. And then we also have a website, and it's our Parks website. There's a page on that Parks website where Kara has been making weekly updates for the past several months. As something happens at the park, as different activities go on at the park, as we come up with different ideas and opportunities for the park, we continue to put that information out there. So it's real-time weekly updates, and as well our park master plan, the other guiding documents that you see are also out there. So if you were to scan that QR code, it'll take you to that same page, and I encourage you to do so and bookmark that. So with that, what questions can we answer for you?
Bring it back. Who wants to go first? What do you think, Mindy?
You wanted to beef up in your presentation, you said about the agreements on the conservancy?
Yes.
And you wanted to improve upon that, or you said beef that up? What exactly are you talking about?
Yeah, so what we've talked about, and actually what is part of our master plan for this particular property, so we currently have, the way that the conservation easement is written, there's currently about 86,000 square feet of developed space on property. That's basically anything that's attached to the ground. It's considering asphalt, any buildings, anything like that is that 86,000 square feet. And that's all been cataloged by the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. The way that it's written, you can double the amount of development that is on that property to just over 170,000. Now, we have no intention in any way of doing that. So what we've talked about is taking that 174,000 and reducing that down to 130,000. That significantly condenses that. Then the other piece of that is there is a riparian buffer around all the wetland areas and the lakes areas, and that buffer is currently 100 feet. And what we've expressed interest in doing, and we're actually working with the Regional Land Conservancy, they are working on revising the documents now, is expanding that from 100 feet to 200 feet around the lakes. Does that help?
Thanks.
Sure.
Should that be part of the plan? Should that be available to the public to read, or how does that work?
Oh, that's available now.
Okay.
Yep.
And where can we get that?
It's on our website. It is actually part of it's incorporated into, I think it's, I should make sure I'm not misspeaking on that. I'm pretty sure that it is actually incorporated into our park master plan.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure it was actually added as an addendum to that plan. So, and it's also on the, it's on the internet as well. So if you searched it, yeah, if you Google it, you'll find it.
Okay.
It's actually how we found it at first.
I was just curious,
Yeah.
Is there any discussion about some things that would not be allowed, such as fireworks?
So actually, that's in our park rules as well. So our park rules specifically prohibit fireworks use, possession, any of that in our park properties.
A major issue, as you've heard, is alcohol usage. How do you see that being managed?
Okay. So again, depending on the type of activity that's occurring, if it's, we would figure out how our plan would be to incentive or disincentivize those kinds of things. So if you have an event where you are serving alcohol, so there's actually a bar, something like that, we'll just use that as an example. I'll put that up at the kind of the highest level of that. Then we would put a pretty hefty fee on something like that. So again, that's that top of the pyramid. So that hefty fee would then disincentivize that activity, but then also help us support the things at the lower end of that pyramid. So what we'd also have to do is events of that type, we would have a staff member who's on property to be able to monitor the events. That's another piece of that disincentivizing, is that in order to be able to have something of that type, we need to have somebody there who's monitoring and managing.
Have you factored in the economics of not having alcohol?
So it really doesn't have an economic impact to us to have or to not have.
Okay, so then why have it?
Okay, it's a good question. Because I guess for enjoyment. I mean, if somebody wants to be able to come to have a small party in the pavilion, should we be the ones that would have to say that you can't bring a beer for that?
Would it be only in the pavilion, or would you see people using alcohol, let's say, in the camping area?
So we haven't even gone to camping yet. That's at that bottom of that gray area.
Okay.
So. Yeah, okay, so there's an example. So we hosted the Paddling Film Festival at Howe Arena. We hosted that in March this year, and for something like that, we did have actually we had, I'm trying to think of the name of them now. Earth and Ales, thank you. So Earth and Ales supported the event, and we worked with a local not-for-profit. That local not-for-profit served beer, and they received the proceeds from that, so it was able to benefit a local not-for-profit.
Okay.
So that's kind of how, some of the ways that we would see that is it creates an extra draw for someone coming to something like that.
It was just a night of film fest.
Yeah, it's just a night of film fest.
But the alcohol would be available as long as the park was open,
Yes.
the hours of the park, but also the calendar year, which the park would be open, correct?
Yes.
So that's a little bit different than more than just one day.
Sure.
Can you kind of talk through a little bit of you've kind of talked about, and I think you did a great job of explaining the differentiation between the special events that are going on as well as the typical park day-to-day. Could you kind of talk through management of different user groups? So let's say that I bring 4 buddies in a truck and we're there to go hike surrounding the property. What would that interaction look like between if there were, you got 100 spots, let's say there's 50 cars there and there's another event that's planned at the pavilion? What would that interaction, would you limit the number of people that the general public could come in? Would it, and could you just kind of talk through
Sure.
what that looks like on a day-to-day?
Sure. So our plan is, as folks are renting different areas, that we would require them to put together a parking plan, or I should say, to work with us on a parking plan. So we would want to make sure that we're not overloading the property and that we're leaving space available for general public to be able to come in and enjoy the property as well. So if somebody was using the amphitheater for an activity, let's call it a play as an example, then we'd have to figure out what that parking plan looked like to make sure that there's still space available.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you envision a maximum allowance as far as participation?
So we haven't landed on a number, and that's, again, one of the things that we'd be looking for your help with. We haven't landed on a specific number, but again, we would look at, if we've got something going on at the park, use that amphitheater play again, all right? So if something like that is happening at the park, that may be something that we say, okay, so that's happening at the park, we're not going to take any other rentals at the park because we want to make sure that it creates a good experience. It doesn't benefit anybody to have an overloaded property. Doesn't benefit anybody to have more stuff that's going on at any one time than the park can handle and create a bad experience for anybody else in the park, or anybody in the area, for that matter.
How would you control that? I mean, I see how you can control it on an event by number of cars or et cetera, but then you have any number of people who can be walking on.
Sure.
So how do you police that?
Yeah. So one of the ways that we would do that is through a caretaker. So we've got a caretaker here in the room who was a caretaker for a number of years, and that's an opportunity. We've got a house that's on property right now, and it's one of the pieces that we've talked about is we want to basically put a caretaker in so that caretaker can be there regularly managing and monitoring what's happening on property. Does that answer, or I'm not sure if I answered it or not?
In 2 ways. One, you have events where people can just quote the public, the bottom tier, right?
Sure.
The bottom of the Maslow chart coming at you. But then you have, my other question is about the security of the place.
Okay.
I mean, how you propose to manage the place from a security standpoint? Like, if there's a problem, who do they go to?
Okay. So our caretaker would be our number one. So you'd have somebody on property. They would then have the opportunity, if there's something that they can't manage, our sheriff's department.
And I guess by having time, you talk about mirroring the East Bay ordinance for noise. But would you be having a limitation, because East Bay doesn't have a factor of noise by time. We don't do that. But you would have something by time, correct?
So what we would do is we would further limit beyond, shorter than the park hours. So we'd limit that down. So if you're renting the pavilion as an example, that quiet hour is not, 10 o'clock here?
We don't have a designated
Okay.
time.
It's noise that doesn't offend
we've got-
a sensible individual.
We have the
Yeah.
sheriff's department that,
Yep.
Yeah, it basically
So we
says
would
at
further
any
reduce
time
that down.
That it's annoying to, a reasonable person.
Yeah.
That's what the ordinance says.
Yeah.
We don't have a real time.
Yeah. So if I use, we're dealing with an all-sports lake, right? So if I use that as an example, so we've got the mosquitoes of the seas and jet skis. We've got, boats and all that stuff out there. They're making noise. There's a certain time where that noise generally shuts off. Whatever that time is generally, that's what we would be looking towards, is to figure out, how do you, 7:30? 7:30, okay. So there's a good example of, we could use the same kind of time frame. If there's an agreement among lake residents that 7:30 is the time to shut off your jet ski, well, maybe that's the time that we use for this limiter.
But I take it that you're not going to have jet skis. You just
No, I'm using that as a noise comparison.
Okay, yeah, but I'm thinking also noise can come from, an event, an egg hunting event.
Sure.
200 kids running around, they make a lot of noise.
They do.
So it's just that, trying to protect against noise, I think it's more an issue of you can't do it on the event, because you can't turn around and say, oh, have fun, but don't make any noise. It seems to me it's more of a timing issue, that you would have to have some strict control by, call it 7:30.
Right.
That may be, call it 8, whatever it is. But that seems to me that would have to be in there.
Yep, and that's reasonable. That's the conversation that we've had as well. But I do hope nobody's going to be too upset if we do have an Easter egg hunt and kids are enjoying. I do hope that nobody's too upset if there's an Easter egg hunt and kids are enjoying themselves.
John, can you talk through as the park kind of evolves and you take on these measures, benchmarks, different activities? Can you kind of speak toward what that relationship looks like with us in terms of managing next phases? As you kind of grow or experience or learn and try to come in, what does that relationship look like with the general public?
Sure. So this is not a one-time process. To go back to your questions as an example, we would continue to learn. We'd continue to tighten those and change those practices as we learn. So you had asked about, actually both of you had asked about people coming in. How do we make sure that we're managing enough parking spaces for that? Well, we'd set a number with those plans, and if we realize that, okay, that number's too high or that number's too low, how do we adjust that over time as we learn more about what's happening on property and how many people are visiting? How many people are just coming in for the day versus coming in for anything specific? So we'd have to continue to make that an iterative process. I have no problem continuing to come here and continuing to learn and share what we've learned in the process as well. As we go through our different phases, as we look at implementing other things that are in phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, what we're looking at we're looking at, for the first few phases, what do we think we can reasonably implement in the first year to 2 years? And then those other phases, we start taking a look 2 to 4 to 5 years.
Sure.
We originally had that set up as phase 1 would be year 1 and phase 2 would be year 2, but we realized that's pretty aggressive, and there's also some things that may bounce between phase 1 and phase 2 as we determine that it's either easier to do that one or harder to do that one.
Sure. And one more thing, then I'll get off the box. The last thing was, you're kind of speaking the same language as the Regional Land Conservancy when I've looked to rent out their space, and your mission kind of aligns with theirs in terms of evaluation of who can utilize that space, right? That was obviously by design. I think that would be very educational for the general public, so that when you do come forward the next go-around, that would be something to include, just so they can kind of see that evaluation, talk through like what those permits are actually going towards, how you would weigh picking this one over that one, and what have you, just as an olive branch.
Oh, absolutely.
Just a piece of suggestion.
Yeah, we've started to dig into some of that, and we've got some of that in a draft form, but rather than bring something here that's half complete, and then when we have something that's half complete, as humans, we go ahead and we fill in the rest of the blanks ourselves. Sure. And I'd rather not have the blanks filled in with speculation, but I'd rather have them filled in with fact.
Thank you. Mindy.
So I really like these boards, and I think I might be one of the only ones that can see it. And I can even see with the lights on, I can see the Post-its on here. But I did notice there's things in your plan that were never discussed over here.
Okay.
Fishing,
Okay.
firearms, archery's on there, but firearms is not. Weddings is not. Alcohol use is not. Parties, wedding receptions, baby showers, grad parties, none of that's on there.
Okay.
This is all very nature-focused. That's not what I saw in the presentation.
Okay.
The other thing that I heard, and I want to reiterate because I heard from you something, and I think that there needs to be some transparency, is you talk about the park rules. There's a set, and then if you've got this event that comes in, they're going to have very specific rules. How do the neighbors know what these rules are? How do the neighbors know that 7:30 is the cutoff time for noise? And that at 8 o'clock, they need to be calling the park manager, there's another word for it, and saying, hey, what's going on? Did something happen? I understand this is supposed to be over at 7:30, what's going on? That's one of the points I would, I don't know if there's a way to allow the public to understand what's going on. And, you talked about changing it as you learn. Can the residents be part of that, changing it as you learn, because X, Y, and Z is going on? Another thing that was talked about in the public comment, but I didn't hear anything about it, except for the fact that you do had the map with the swimming area on it. I see swimming only has 2 dots on it.
Okay?
Some of these have, I don't know, I didn't count them, 15, 20 dots on them. Swimming has 2, so I don't, but the ADA question, are you going to have a road to get to the swimming area?
We do not plan to make any additional roads into the property.
So you're not planning on bringing any asphalt or concrete into the 4 roadways?
No.
Okay. And then, I think that was the last note that I put. Oh, the chapel. The chapel, I assume from your discussion, though I've never seen it, is just really maybe an outdoor area with some benches on it.
That's correct.
It's not like, a church or a structure in any way, shape, or form. It's just outdoor.
Yeah, there's a small structure with 2 little rooms in the side. There's a peak in the middle with a thing hanging from the in the center, looks like a light fixture or something.
So when you're talking about a wedding, you're talking maybe, 30 people and not 300 people?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Beyond the wedding, though, there could be a reception, correct? If they rent it out Besser Hall?
So it's not something that we've talked about pursuing for that, but it's also a very hard one to stop. If somebody is having a family party there, they can call it a family party, but it can be something else other than that. And that's where, again, you have the opportunity to disincentivize some of those things. So for example, with Besser Lodge, one of the things that we've talked about with Besser Lodge is that if you're renting Besser Lodge, you're renting Besser Lodge for the entire weekend. And that price would be steep to rent that Besser Lodge for the entire weekend. And that alone is going to tell people, that's not the place for me to be able to do that. I want it for a shorter period of time. Well, you're getting it for the whole period of time, so either you're paying that amount or not. And that also, from our standpoint, from a staff standpoint, it also limits the time that we need to be changing over properties and all that sort of stuff.
So that pricing schedule, has that been determined yet?
No, we're still working through that.
Okay.
Yeah, come on up. This is Carrie Yulee.
Hey, Kara Yulee, Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation. I wanted to kind of put a little bit of a finer point too on the timeline for the when are we going to do this. I imagine that a lot of people out here want to know like when. So our intention is, as part of the site plan review, that you would have these operationalized definitions of timeframes around Besser Lodge rentals, fee structures to incentivize nonprofits. The dates, like John mentioned, we would anticipate if you rent Besser Lodge, it's for the entire weekend. So right off the bat, you're going from an event Friday, Saturday, Sunday to there's one rental opportunity in a weekend. So again, time frame for that, as well as more detail on the parking plan and how we control double bookings, which we do really well at Civic Center. So we have their fields, amphitheater, pavilion, Howe Arena, outdoor space, food truck permits. Our reservation and logistics team manages those to prevent user conflicts, make sure that the public can still access that space. And so it's our intention to duplicate that same model. And it is our intention to have those details for you in the site plan review so that you understand how we will function, so that the public knows what the ending time is on the Besser Lodge rental, et cetera. Does that help a little bit too?
And you'll have staffing details?
Yes. The plan would be that we would have an idea of when we would have staff on site, what we would have them monitoring and doing. Like John mentioned, a caretaker on property, when that would occur and what that would look like. We've had a lot of internal discussions about what should the staff person doing? Should we be having them count parking spaces? Should we be having them walk around? Like, what are the things that are going to give us the best bang for the buck so that the public can continue to have a good parks experience even when there's rentals going on?
So with respect to the access to Rennie Lake, there's approximately 300 feet there, correct?
Yep.
So the conservation easement, again, you said I can go and find it on the website. I didn't know that and wasn't smart enough to Google it, but I will. What are you looking at changing there? Anything with that?
So at this point, there are some structures that are in the water. There's some half-used structures, I guess I'll call them. There's some wooden structures, those sorts of
Old
things.
docks and such?
Yeah, old docks and those sorts of things. So we're planning on cleaning that up, cleaning that area up, taking some of that out where we can. That, somebody had mentioned earlier, the lifeguard stand. It's basically a concrete pad and then some poles. We need to figure out how do we take care of that. It's also, I think, a pretty thick piece of concrete, so we need to figure out if and how we can do anything with that
Remove
piece. Yeah.
Okay.
And that may change how we end up using the area as well.
Okay.
Are there, oh, yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, simply put, I feel like we just need more detail.
Sure.
And that's, people need information, and it may be a lot of info in this next packet, where you do have everything laid out, like, we're designating 20% for just your average recreational person coming to enjoy the trails, and the rest is up to the venues. We just need that information.
Our goal
And
is
it's up to you.
flip that, but
I mean, yeah, whatever. I'm just saying, I just feel like you need to come to tell us what you're seeing or what you're projecting as usage so that we can look at it and be like, that fits or that doesn't fit.
sure.
So Claire, as we kind of look through what's, proposed here, and yes, it's very high level and not a lot of detail, and you're working through that. But we've heard from the public a lot of the comparisons, shall I say, to the other G word that you didn't want to say. So looking through, some of those comments, the use of like Besser Lodge for weddings or amplified music or concerns that we had with the previous PUD, those seem to be coming back. So how do we, as the Planning Commission, knowing what the board has said, how do we address some of those?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I did talk with legal counsel a little bit before the meeting this evening, and we will have some assistance at future meetings, just from kind of a legal perspective. I will say that this is a different application process, given the fact that this is a public entity. So with Rotary, yes, they could have come in as like a private park, which we don't allow private parks in the Lakes area anymore, but they're not a governmental entity. Generally, governmental entities don't regulate to the extent that we would a commercial or other non-local unit of government. So I would say, in terms of that specific threshold, I think that, the Planning Commission, while there are not specific standards related to public parks in our zoning ordinance, we do have standards related to site plan review, to all of the site plan standards and how those uses relate with the surrounding, so.
You talked about earlier about the transient activity permits and when those would be triggered. Can you kind of just tell us what you're thinking there about what activities would be required of it, or are you looking for that from us?
So I am looking for, I would be looking for the county to provide kind of an idea of what they're seeing as day-to-day operations. And then I would also look for the Planning Commission to kind of help work with the county to determine that appropriate threshold.
Because
The one thing I can say is the way that we've drafted our special event ordinance is that special event ordinance treats public properties a little bit different than private properties, in that there's no maximum number of special events that can occur on a public property.
So if you have the need to, or we decide that we need to issue out these transient, event permissions, who's running the show? Is it East Bay or is it the county?
That would be the East Bay Township issuing a special event permit in conjunction with, fire, EMS, emergency services, depending on, the scope of the project. But we internally would review a special event permit.
So if John Q. Public wanted to have an event, who do they go to? Do they come here or do they go to
They would likely have to get permission, definitely from the county, as well as if it meets our threshold, they would need permission also from the township. So they would need a special event permit from the township as well as from the county. That's what's done right now with like MDNR, you know, has rarely, but has had like a fishing tournament that, you know, there was a requirement for through the state as well as through East Bay Township.
Okay, it's just that in the next discussion, I think something around that coordination is something we need to look at.
As well as maybe an anticipated number of those events. You might just kind of do a little projection as best you can, think about the number of weekends you want to, or events of that magnitude, I would just say consider.
Yeah, I can see some confusion around the management from the 50,000-foot view about who's there at what time. It's just a thought.
I mean, from a management perspective?
Well, yeah, as to what activities are happening at the same time and who's actually controlling, because we were talking about the density and overuse of the park, and it just seems that we have two entities that, unless they're coordinated really, really well, I can see some friction on that one.
Yeah, so like with any type of special event that we permit at the township, I'll use, you know, Timber Ridge, the Iceman as an example. We review it ahead of time, but East Bay Township staff doesn't have any role in the actual event or management or any type of the day-to-day operation. It's really just reviewing the site plan, reviewing to make sure that they have all of the kind of ancillary effects taken care of related to parking, access, emergency services.
But do you have veto power?
Yes, because we have specific standards.
Okay, just want to know.
What do you think, Mindy? You were going to say something.
One of the other major concerns a couple years ago that was in front of our board was how many people could be in Besser Lodge. I think that's really a function of the parking. But there was some interesting conversations about that, just so that you're aware and you can bring that back as, you know, what is the maximum that you're going to allow in Besser Lodge.
Thank you.
Are you considering amplified music to be allowed?
So that is a consideration, yes.
Okay, because the Board of Trustees historically said that that's not allowed
Well,
under the previous review.
yeah, the applicant withdrew their application, but there was discussion at the Board of Trustees level about amplified music as well as about alcohol.
So,
But
may I ask-
there was no decision that was made by the board.
There's no decision made.
Right, because the applicant pulled it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that? So my question is, if somebody's out on their boat, can they not play music on their boat?
They can,
Okay.
and it travels, and
Right.
depending on how loud it is and the time, that could be, you know, a
Sure.
violation of the noise ordinance.
Right, so you want to fit within those parameters, but they're amplifying music on that boat.
Potentially, they are, yes. So it would be a violation, and if somebody on the lake wanted to call that in, they could and would,
Okay.
most likely.
Fair enough, thank you.
John, are there any other questions that you have for us? Any points of clarity that you want from?
Not at the moment, I know
Commission?
that, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no.
You've given great feedback, and I appreciate that, as well as the group here has given great feedback, and these are definitely things that we take into consideration, and we'll come back with more information.
Last question for me is, what's that timeline look like?
We'd like to be able to come back in July,
Okay.
so we need to talk about how much time we have in order to be able to put a packet together, and that will help determine that.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for the explanation. Appreciate you coming in and kind
Thank you.
of educating us, and we'll look forward to working with you
Thank you.
in the future.
Claire, I have one question for you. So would this be kind of similar to the state park where they did it in 2 phases? And they're kind of talking about phases. Is
Oh,
this
yeah.
something that let's say we go forward and phase 1 is going to be up to that point where he said, we're going to stop here.
Exactly, yeah. So
And
if
then
this-
phase 2 would be
If
later.
the site plan was approved as presented, the planning commission would be approving phase 1, 2, and a portion of phase 3, with the understanding that the remainder of phase 3, 4, and 5 would come back in front of the planning commission for a future site plan review and approval.
Thank you.
Makes sense, good question. Okay, next up is, we're on to 9C, temporary dwelling update and next steps. Claire, let's kind of bring us back up to speed where we're at on this
So
conversation.
this is really, I just wanted to keep this on the agenda to provide an update because I know there's a lot of interest both from the commission as well as from the public. There was a number of edits that were made, some recommendations for
Hold on.
changes.
Excuse me, can we just, we've still got a meeting going on, so if anybody wants to leave, feel free to do so, but just please be so quiet. Thanks.
So based on our discussion in April and May, there were 3 changes that we're planning to make to the ordinance. The reason that we are delaying bringing back the updated language is mostly related to the permitting, because we're going to be looking at kind of dual permitting. So one type of permit would just be your standard land use permit if someone's looking to have a temporary dwelling for a fire, some sort of an emergency home construction. The other type of permit that we're looking at would be more of would be like a temporary permit where they're saying, we're camping for a week, we're camping for, X number of days. And so still working with legal counsel to get some guidance on whether or not that would be specifically in the zoning ordinance or if that would be more of like a police power general law ordinance that would supplement the temporary dwelling section of the zoning ordinance. So we've talked with legal counsel. As you may be aware, our new legal counsel has taken over 60 new clients, and so they're very busy right now. And so just getting all of that information, and we're a little bit delayed in bringing that back to the Planning Commission.
Got it. That makes sense. Anything else we need to bring up in terms of this? It sounds like we've got more to come, of course, and more to kind of keep everybody else abreast.
Sam mentioned something about the ability to use some software for some of this, just so that people, to apply for a permit or, kind of like giving a printable document that says you can camp and here's the start date and here's the number of dates. He suggested maybe that one of the software packages you guys had might work for something like that.
I haven't talked with him about that yet.
Okay, and I may have misunderstood him, but I thought that he was looking or thinking that something might work for that.
Yeah, he hasn't mentioned that to
Okay,
me, so.
all right.
Any other questions on this one?
That could be.
Okay, and then last up, under 9D is the MDNR discussion regarding their adjusted or requested changes to their site plan.
Yeah, so I wanted to just bring this back to the Planning Commission. I received this letter, so it's dated, was it the 28th when I received it? I guess it was the 28th. So we received this letter last week. They are wanting the Planning Commission to reconsider one of the conditions. As you'll recall, we talked a lot about the access, and with their site plan, there was the access kind of on the the easterly side of the state park. The Planning Commission desired to have just basically an opening in the gate on the northwest corner of the state park. I guess from my perspective, the fact that they were just going to put an opening in the gate, there was really no sidewalk, there was no additional infrastructure. I think it's a little bit of a stretch for the Planning Commission to tie their arms when the state park so strongly desires not to have that opening and that access point. So I guess I would leave it up to the Planning Commission, except to say that, the state park has, they operate these parks across the state of Michigan. They're pretty familiar with their operations and with their security and with what they're comfortable with. And so, I would be comfortable not requiring that condition, but it's ultimately would be up to the Planning Commission.
What are your thoughts?
I didn't have an issue with it before, so I'm okay with removing it.
I think that they've got an access gate around the TART trail. This is the exact same thing. There is no house, there's no anything at that entrance to the campground. I don't understand how where it's right by there is big deal. I fail to see how the one on the TART trail is more secure than the one right next to the registration. I fail to see why we can't put the same sign that's on that one that says no camping to comply with the state law that they're referencing. I fail to see how that is any different than this, especially since this one is along the highway. So if they're worried about, people coming in and doing something that they shouldn't be doing in the campground, I think you got, bigger issues on the TART trail where people aren't driving by constantly. I think they should keep it.
Any other thoughts?
I think they should keep it, especially with that crossing right there. And they're right at their entrance point for their check-in, not the entrance, but where they're entering the camp for permitted or, paid their camping fees and are heading into the park. There's somebody there at that administration house.
Personally, this was not a sticking point for me when we were discussing it last time. I know Mindy felt very strongly as well as others about it. I guess I kind of defer back to MDNR, and they run parks all over the state of Michigan and know what they're doing, and it was not a sticking point for me, so I would be fine with removing it.
What do you think, Paul?
I didn't understand the main objections, and again, I'll reference back to, the fact that you do have an entrance at the TART trail, which is unsupervised, and it seems that this one has more, what we proposed had more security and supervision than the other one. So I must say, I'm just would probably need to know a little more what their real objections are. I have no idea. I mean, it just seemed a lot of, we have to have safety and this and that and the other thing, but yet it didn't really grab it. So I would just say, tell me why. I mean, convince me that we need to get rid of that other entrance.
I'm falling in line with keeping it because of two things. One is anytime you can get somebody walking along that road, off of that road quicker, I'm all about, especially if you're visiting that campground. Having access to that, I think would just be a benefit. Secondly, we also know what's coming down the line adjacent to that property. So to have user groups be able to access that amenity or group of amenities easier, I think would reduce even more people walking along the edge of 31. And as, yes, previously stated with the southeast corner, I think of other campgrounds around here in East Bay Township that have their borders way more open than this one. And I don't hear them complaining. I don't believe that there's an issue really with that mitigation of people going in and out for negative reasons. I think to have more access to that park would be a great benefit to the people, just general public walking through there, but as well as the visitors through that corridor as well. I don't know if that helps you at all, however.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I think the one thing that I'm challenged with is the fact that there is no facility, like there's no sidewalk. It's basically just an opening in the fence.
Right.
So someone walks in and then they're just on the grass and then they're crossing, multiple lanes of traffic. And so it's hard to require something where it's not, from my perspective, it's not an adequate facility.
So you'd rather us take it a step further than and have some type of trail system in place there?
I mean, that's where I was going at the last meeting, but we didn't end up going.
I don't know.
Getting quite that far.
I kind
so.
of think that just human nature and seeing how most places work, the path of least resistance will become apparent quickly. But I don't know. What do
I mean,
y'all
they
think?
said they were willing to have the opening if that was, if the township was set on that. They just wanted one kind of last chance to see if the planning commission was willing to change their mind, so.
I haven't changed my mind.
Do you want to vote?
Yeah, you want to do that?
Sure.
We could do that, just to make it official.
I'll make a motion to deny the May 28, 2025 request of the MDNR to remove the condition of the gate.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mindy, seconded by Paul, to not support their recommendation to remove the gate requirement, or the opening requirement. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, reading the tea leaves, motion carries.
So
We
is it-
could do a roll call just to make it clear.
Okay, Walters.
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Yes.
Richardson.
No.
Did I say Gonzalez? I did. Wasm.
Yes.
Edley.
No.
And Leonard.
Yes,
Okay, that's what I had left too.
motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for the discussion, too. Next up is public comment. Round 2, you get a second crack at it. Come on up. Please tell us who you are.
Sure. James Thompson on Scout Camp Road, Runny Lake. I am going to say the G word, go rec, because I do feel like we're going down that path again. I don't want to come right out and say we were lied to, but I don't think transparency is what we have seen. There was a huge amount of trust in what the county was bringing to us in previous meetings. We were talking about education. We were talking about an extension of the Brown Bridge area. That was the vision. The vision was very pretty. We saw it today. But now the vision has changed to we want to make memories. It sounds like a commercial pitch to me. It sounds like we want to make some money to fund other activities. That sounds very much like what the Rotary was doing. I see a cost recovery model. I saw the pyramid. I worked in business for a long time, and it's double speak to me. It becomes a circle. You have an event, we've got to recover the cost because we're running cabins. We got to have more staff people. We create more cost, we have to have more events. I'm really scared when I saw those words on the presentation. I didn't plan on speaking today. I've given the county the benefit of the doubt. They've blown that, based on what I've seen. I really want to know what the vision is for the park. Phase 1 through 5, great, but what really are you trying to do here? Is it education, or is it something else? I'm also concerned about the park rules. I've heard that mentioned before. I went on the website really quick. I didn't do much research. There's item number 7. It talks about noise. And I heard amplified music today. Those things don't match. I don't know what to believe anymore about what the plan is for this county park. And also, I know that there's a noise ordinance for the county, for the township. Some of these events do not match the noise ordinance. They're just not in agreement. And I think the last thing is, I hope that the Planning Commission, based on this last discussion you just had going through the nth detail on an opening at the state park, has the same level of oversight for this plan, because this could quickly get out of hand based on what I've heard tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
I'm Jacqueline Andrus. I'm here tonight as an East Bay resident, East Bay Township resident, and I'm freezing, so I'm shivering. Forgive me, I'm going to keep my hand.
Thanks, it's not just me, all right?
It's cold in
freezing
here.
in here. Puppy dog knows.
I live very close in the proximity of the Graylick property. I am a devout user, lover, and advocate for the Brown Bridge Quiet Area. I had some other things I was going to talk about, but I echo all of the objections that I hear from my neighbors. But I want to highlight, so we don't lose focus on the fact that the largest neighbor to this property is the Brown Bridge Quiet Area. It is a quiet area for one reason and purpose, and that's for peaceful, quiet enjoyment. The weddings, the capacity, the parties, the large groups, the family reunions, the tournaments, the large events, whatever they decide to rent it out to, they are in direct conflict with the use and management plan and vision and the core values of our existing Brown Bridge Quiet Area. I, for one, do not want to share trails or come face to face with drunk wedding goers, people enjoying alcohol for enjoyment. These uses do not align. Who's going to enjoy peaceful, quiet enjoyment when there's a wedding and music being projected out into nature, which is right next door? I also I want you to consider strongly, I didn't see on John's map where this firing range or rifle range is going to be. You can laugh and say, oh, we're going to put a sign that says, don't go here. I'm sorry, that's no joke to me. When I'm walking on the trails in the Brown Bridge Quiet Area, I don't want to have to look over my shoulder or listen to bullets around me. Where are they? Who knows? I didn't see it on his plan up there. So these don't align. And I don't think it's a good use of our police department and the sheriff's department and our community officers to go responding to campers who are drinking at 10, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning and wandering into the Brown Bridge Quiet Area. That's not what my taxes are going toward. I'm sorry. I will, the traffic on Hobbs Highway with the alcohol coming in and out and in and out, that doesn't jive. Driving through those windy roads, we should not invite alcohol into our community, putting us at risk, harm, and God only knows what else. I shudder to think. And the first three phases, their priorities include all of the above. So that is the priority. And you know what? If I want to have a big party, I know I'm going to pay the fee for Besser Lodge. That does not deter someone. It just makes more money. I'm sorry, that's the facts. So I'm losing my train of thought because there's just so much that I have to say about this, but it's those items that I would ask that you respect and keep at the forefront of these decisions that you're going to be making, that not only are they going to affect the surrounding neighbors, they're going to affect the entire community and anyone who traverses through there or goes to enjoy the property. You've got a party going on over here when you have a family trying to enjoy themselves at a park. I won't go to a park that I can expect that to be happening. I'm sorry. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Good evening. Rod Kivel. I am an East Bay resident, property owner here in East Bay. I'm also the elected president of the Grand Traverse County Parks and Rec Commission. And a lot of this that's going on, I just feel I want to remind this group, Grand Traverse County today manages Power Island. We have 15 rustic campground sites, 5 on Bassett, 10 on Power Island. We allow alcohol there in a campground. There are many rules around it.
People love that place to go. We also manage and own Maple Bay up on the east, up in the Acme. That is not a drunken, somebody can have a beach wedding, all those things can happen, but you don't hear about it. There's not drunken people wandering around. It's very, I mean, you can still have a beach wedding there. To say we can't have weddings doesn't make it, a piece of property. And there are many little weddings and things that happen. As far as the hunting, Brown Bridge is huntable in the season.
Only one area.
Only one area.
Small area, and we don't need more.
Just saying that rifle range, that shooting range, that archery range have been in existence on the Boy Scout camp and could be used for education, youth education in hunting, those types of things. 4-H has expressed some interest in having those things. Those are all managed by our group and by permit of the director. I think some of these things, we can stand here and I can think of a lot of things and say, you'll have a drunk, you'll have this. It's not. We are not managing that in any different way. That commission is going to manage it just like we do Power Island, Maple Bay, Medalley Park, for goodness sakes. We have the Tritons rowing there. Civic Center Park. You can have a beer in your car at Civic Center Park. Right? Well, there's a lot of softball, a lot of baseball, a lot of kids. So those things are something that Grand Traverse County, by our park rules, we manage every day. And I think that what you'll see is we're going to bring you back that same type of management for the Greilich property. Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.
I know it's getting late, so I'll try to make this quick. With all due respect, the alcohol thing is apples and oranges. Power Island is out in the middle of the bay. It's not, nobody's like leaving it to go someplace else after a banger. This park is connected to windy, twisty, low line of sight roads out in the middle of nowhere where people feel incredibly empowered, far away from authority. Speaking of authority, the last time around with GOREC, we spoke to the Sheriff's Department about this, and they told me, they weren't willing to say this publicly, but they were not staffed to handle what was going to happen with GOREC. Nothing has changed in terms of staffing at the Sheriff's Department. They are no more equipped to handle this with the county than they were with GOREC. The referenced quiet hours, that's actually a county ordinance that's on the books. I'm happy to provide that as a copy to anyone. The master plan that the county adopted states 100 participants at the chapel, not 30. So we're talking about a factor of 3 in terms of difference there. And the other significant point to make is that page 5 of the September 12, 2022 minutes, where the Board of Trustees were deciding on the GOREC PUD, page 5 says, these were in the recorded minutes, board members reviewed section 602 special land use review standards and determined that item B was not met because of the possibility of amplified noise, alcohol, and events, which may change the intended character of the general vicinity. Item B was not met. Attorney Wendling urged board members that if there was to be any condition placed on amplified sound, to keep it simple, enforceable condition. The board felt that this item would not meet the standard because proposed uses could very well be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future uses in the same general vicinity and in the community as a whole. This is definitive. This is so definitive that 15 days later, the Rotary submitted this email to the township withdrawing their application because the board made it so abundantly clear that alcohol and amplified music were not going to satisfy the requirements and would not be permitted in this area. So I don't really care that the board didn't officially make a decision on that application. What they weighed in on the public record and their positions that they made clear on alcohol and amplified music ceased that application to exist. Its validity died because of the comments that were made by the board that night. Thank you very much. I appreciated the conversation that happened tonight. Thank you all.
Thanks, Josh.
As usual, Josh does an awesome job in
underlining and researching and making sure that he understands what the ordinance is and how this board has made judgments in the past. So thank you, Josh, for the clarity of your thinking. I would make this observation for my friend from the county's Parks and Recreation Department, in that I'll remind him that Power Island is not occupied by residents. It's pretty much empty. So what goes on over there, nobody else is subject to. Whereas if you're residing in the immediate area, you are immediately affected by what goes on over there. I will remind you that regardless of whether or not there is a caretaker on site, if that caretaker is not deputized, they're useless. They're useless. They can't enforce anything. We're dependent upon the goodwill of the sheriff in responding, and he's made it pretty clear to us that he's got better things to do, frankly. So I want you to keep that in mind, the reality of this. And I also want to remind you that my reading of the ordinances, and I've tried to be very careful about this, I'm not an attorney, I'm a nurse. But what I understand from the ordinances is it's pretty clear. It states all. The county is not an exception because they're a governmental agency. It doesn't give them any kind of special right to walk over the rights of the rest of us. So, we're going to bow and scrape to their desires. No, that's not how those rules work, and it's not how those ordinances are written. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Walt Behringer, East Bay residents, out on Chandler Lake. I appreciate the fact that the county came forward and presented this plan tonight, but I really honestly felt like it was smoke and mirrors. I honestly felt like it was an application for an event venue masked around a park. I feel as if it was just absolutely taking advantage of trying to educate the public, trying to provide wonderful outdoor, quiet activities, but the whole pyramid idea, obviously, it's got to be funded somehow. And again, I think someone else made a comment, doesn't matter how expensive that is, there's obviously a demand in our area, whether it be a wedding reception, an outdoor event. The thought of having a play at an amphitheater in a park, to me, is just so counterproductive to what that space should be used for. We're surrounded by nature in East Bay Township. I live on Chandler Lake. Watching bald eagles fly overhead, listening to the loons at night. Noise pollution is huge for wildlife. It does not belong in those environments. We have an area called Brown Bridge Road. It's a quiet space. This should be a quiet space. I do feel like it's GOREC all over again. I don't feel like this is any different. Shooting ranges, amplified music, loud behavior, that's all detrimental to all the wildlife we enjoy here. Bats can't hunt mosquitoes when there's a lot of noise. Birds change their mating patterns. Deer run away. They may, abandon their young. All these things happen. This should be a quiet area. If the county wants to do something with the space, I think that's wonderful, but it should not be an event venue. We had a application about a year ago. It was on Smith Road here for that beautiful barn being considered for a wedding venue, an event space. It was declined. The argument was it's not in a commercial area. It's in a residential area, and the applicant was declined. Would have made a beautiful wedding venue, but should it be there? No. Should this be there? I don't think so either. That's just how I feel about it. Thank you, though.
Thanks, Walt.
Ron McCulloch, I live on Arbutus Lake. Just a couple of things, concerns. I've been to a number of these meetings. I've never spoken before at them. I feel compelled tonight. I guess my first couple of concerns, one is scope creep. You talk about this being a public entity versus private entities, but if concerts, amplified music, food trucks, alcohol, catering, weddings are all okay at the park, then are they okay at Lakemore? Are they okay at that barn? Are they okay in my backyard with a tent? So I'm worried about scope creep, like we've seen on things before. And then the other thing is the private enjoyment by neighbors. We talk about amplified music and alcohol. I'm on Arbutus Lake. I got the Y Camp right across the lake from me. We got the state forest, we got a city park, all great neighbors. All people enjoying the lake. No alcohol sales, no amplified music, reasonable hours. Other things you can look at is Ottawa County Parks. I've been to a wedding there at one of their events, one of their places that they can rent. But they have our ordinance. No sound that can be heard more than 20 yards from any site. So if you have an amphitheater, if you have a building, if you rent it, you can't have any sounds that carry 20 yards past that building. So alcohol sounds like a moneymaker to me. Sounds like it's in here so we can make more money. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Unprepared but inspired. Sue Svensson, and I live on Scout Camp Road, so I'm right on Rennie Lake. Very concerned about what I've heard. I understand that we have this incentive by management to attract certain groups. I don't know how you can do that legally, and saying this versus that, or price out a different group to another group, or so on, and also would encourage that you do have limits. So, for example, if the lodge could close at 5 o'clock, that might be something. The new senior center is closing at 5. I don't think that's unreasonable. So again, try to be reasonable with when things open and close. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, the public auction is officially closed. We appreciate all the public comment this evening. Thanks, everybody. Our upcoming meeting date is July 1st, 2025. And with nothing further, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.